It was the fall of 1994 and my scout group decided we would do a little cabin camping up in the Appalachians in Western Virginia. One of our scoutmasters happened to be a member of the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club, and they owned and maintained a bunch of property all about the mountain areas. Needless to say, this wasn't the first time we had been to one of these cabins. However, this was the first time we had been to this particular one. It is situated off of a mountain road near Standardsville. We arrived late Friday evening, the sun just dipping below the horizon. The autumn air chilling us as we hiked up to the ominous building. We were a group of about 15 young Boy Scouts, me included, and 3 adult chaperones. Of course, being kids, and Boy Scouts, we were not very quiet in our entrance. There was a lot of yelling and screaming, your typical prepubescent horsing around. Dropped off our stuff and got a huge bonfire going in the field in front of the cabin and started dinner. It was your typical everyday campout. At least until one of our leaders asked a few of us to go seek out the spring for some fresh water. That's when things started to get a little hairy. The spring is located in the woods a few dozen yards from the cabin. Being dark, we had to find the sign that directed us to it. 3 of us decided to go and look for it while the rest got their tinfoil dinners going. It was me, my best friend, and a younger kid who I'll call Jake for this story. I didn't know Jake very well, nor did my friend. We all had our flashlights out and started looking for the sign. We found it pretty quick and headed into the dark woods. We got in pretty far, listening for the sound of flowing water but hearing nothing. The sounds of the other boys were gone. We couldn't even see the bonfire anymore. It dawned on all of us all of a sudden that it was deathly quiet, and aside from our flashlights, it was very dark. Of course, we were all kids and we started to freak ourselves out just by thinking about it. Jake then stumbled onto the shallow spring and called us over to him. We forgot about the darkness and started to fill our jugs. Then, like everyone before me said, we felt that feeling of dread come over us. That feeling that something was watching you and that your skin had a mind of its own and wanted to crawl off you and hide. The hair on my arms started to stand on ends, and I looked up at my buddy Chuck and he had this look as if he was feeling the exact same thing. We both turned to Jake and he was looking ahead, straight at the woods, his eyes fixed on something. I flashed my lights at him and he wouldn't budge. I looked towards the general direction of where he was staring. What I saw still frightens me to this day. It was the silhouette of a man, or what looked like a man, hunched over. His eyes reflected our lights, and gave off that strange red reflection like a deer caught in your headlights. Without so much of a thought, I got up and took off in the opposite direction. My buddy Chuck was not far behind me. I screamed at the top of my lungs, running as fast as my little legs could carry me. I dropped my light, but I didn't care. I kept going. It seemed like forever that I was running until I tripped over myself and fell into a pile of leaves. My mind caught up to me. It was then I realized that I was lost. I crawled over to a tree and then saw Chuck blaze by it. I called out to him. He stopped dead in his tracks and ran back over to where I was standing. Jake was nowhere to be found. We tried to get reoriented. We listened for our group. Not a sound was heard. Then we heard the most blood-curdling scream I have ever heard. It was Jake. Chuck and I both looked at each other and ran toward the sound. We heard the others calling for us. We ran toward them. It seemed like an eternity before we found our group. We told them what happened and they immediately went towards the spring. No sign of Jake. I pointed out where I saw the man and we walked over. On the ground was a torn part of Jake's shirt. At this point, one of the leaders decided it was a good idea for us to split up, one half continuing to search for Jake and the other head back into town and get the police. We spent half the night looking for him. Nothing. When we returned to the cabin, the other group was waiting for us. We found out that the tires to our vehicles were blown out. There was no leaving tonight. This was pre-cell phones, so we had no other choice than to bunk up for the morning. We all hunkered down for a long evening. No one slept. We thought about Jake. Throughout the night we could hear strange noises outside. No one was brave enough to look outside. Some of the younger boys were crying. We had no weapons. We had an axe, but that was pretty much it. It was the longest night of all our lives. The next morning, as the sun started to peak above the tree line, we looked outside. Standing there in the meadow was a half-naked Jake. The adults ran out of the cabin to grab him. They brought him into the cabin and he stood there motionless. Not a single peep or anything. He was pale, lifeless. He had scratches on his back and arms, as if an animal had dragged him through the woods. The weirdest thing I remember was that they looked like they were burned into his skin. A group of the guys hiked down to the town and called the police. We got a tow truck to come get the vehicles. Our weekend was spent in the sheriff's office being interviewed about what happened. After that incident, we were forbidden to go to any of the PATC facilities ever again. Jake disappeared with his family. I never knew what happened to them. To this day I will not set foot alone, unarmed, in the dark in the backwoods of Appalachia. Here's the Google location of the cabin.